Hi, I'm Pastor Michael Schmidt. Welcome to Bible Study. We are continuing our look at the account of Samson, found in Judges chapters 13 through 16. Today and next week, we will be focusing on Judges chapter 16. Samson's relationship with Delilah, his death, and sort of what becomes of him afterward. I would remind you that if you have a favorite character or story that you would like to review in a Bible study, please let me know. Old Testament, New Testament, you tell me, and we will cover it in Bible study as we move forward. Starting in October, we will be looking at your selections for favorite characters in Bible stories. So please do let me know, and we will begin looking at them. If we go backwards, forwards, it doesn't matter. Let me know who your favorites are. Which ones do you remember? What sticks with you? If you, it might be a longer one or it might be a shorter one. We'll kind of figure that out as we go along, but let me know and we'll cover them. So we are in Judges chapter 16. Chapter 15 ended with, sort of closed off with Samson judged Israel in the days of the Philistines, 20 years. We had this tit for tat there in chapter 15 with Samson and the Philistines going back and forth. The Philistines trying to capture Samson and Samson destroying the Philistines. We kind of described it almost as guerrilla warfare or terrorist warfare. A one-man wrecking band is Samson. Well, chapter 16, we're kind of fast-forwarding a little bit. If he judged Israel 20 years, Lutheran Study Bible has chapter 15 occurring at about 1068, and then chapter 16 occurring at about 1049 BC. So that is in that 20-year ballpark, 19-20-year ballpark that we see there. And so we're skipping ahead to really the end of Samson's life here in chapter 16. It's almost like a comic book. You only just get a couple of highlights there. We have this birth highlight, then we have this middle highlight, and then we have the end of his life. It's almost like a trilogy. Where you sort of skip, you have the opening scene of the trilogy, kind of like a Star Wars movie, episode 1, and then we skip a couple years and we get a snapshot in episode 2 of his middle years, and then kind of the end in episode 3 with his later years. So we're kind of bouncing around, bouncing from point to point here. Don't catch a lot of that in-between stuff. Presumably, Samson's life continues the pattern that it has before. Moments of faithfulness, moments of unfaithfulness, and yet God remains with him and blesses him. And the Philistines constantly are trying to capture him and overtake him, but Samson always, by his brute strength, muscles through and powers out. So chapter 16 then, we see Samson, he's an older man now, not necessarily retirement age, but more middle age. These sort of chapter 14 and 15 looked at his marriage. He would have probably been married, thinking about that at a very young age. So now he's conceivably about 40 years old. So he goes down to Gaza and he sees a prostitute, and he ESV says he went in with her. Went into her. Basically, he had sex with her. So he, again, violates the 6th commandment. This is not his wife. He lies with a prostitute, breaks the 6th commandment that you shall not commit adultery. The people of Gaza find out that Samson is in the neighborhood, verse 2, and they want to ambush him. They want to kill him. But so they're sitting outside all night long. Samson is inside with the prostitute. Maybe he falls asleep. Maybe they're just sort of having their relations as they go about in there. Samson comes out in the middle of the night, and he goes to the gates of the city, rips the doors off the gates of the city, and then carries them out up onto the mountain outside of town, and he plants them on the hill. And, we think of that and it's like, man, what a strange thing to do. But what do doors of the gates of a city mean? Well, it's a symbol of your strength. It's a symbol of your power. The bigger your gates, the stronger your gates are, the harder it's going to be for the enemy to get through. If you think to the book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah is all about building the walls around Jerusalem. And the neighbors of Israel, neighbors of Judah, are mad, and they want them to stop building these walls. Why? Because they're worried about Jerusalem rising again and being a power again. Better to have this ransacked, rubble-laden city with nothing in it, but it's just an absolute mess. Better to build up the walls of strength and power, and to remain have these walls, this strong city. So that's what we're looking at here, is that we have this city that they need to build up these walls. Here in Gaza, of course, is what we're talking about. That Samson rips the doors off the gates of the city, and he carries them out and he plants them on the hill. Well, that means their ambush wasn't going to work. This is Samson ripping off their symbol of strength and power and planting it on a green hill outside the city. He tears away their strength and power. They are no match for him. Which points us to Christ. What does Christ do? He drags that cross out of Jerusalem and he takes it out. That cross is a symbol of man's power. It's a symbol of the Roman government's authority and power over Israel, over Jesus. That we are going to make you drag this cross out of the city, and you're going to plant it on a green hill outside the city, and you're going to suffer and die there. That's our symbol of power. Well, of course, Jesus overcomes that symbol of power. He overcomes that power of the Romans and of Israel. He dies, but then he rises again. That cross had no power over him. And so we see that there, that Samson is pointing us ahead to that, keeping us focused on Jesus. Well, those verses there, verses 1 to 3, is kind of just a little random event that is described here, that Samson goes and sleeps with this prostitute in Gaza, and then he tears the gates off the city and carries them out to the mountain. Verse 4 then, we really get into the nitty-gritty of chapter 16 and Samson's downfall. So after this, after the events in Gaza, he meets a woman named Delilah in the valley of Sorek. So not far from where Samson was born and raised, but still not an Israelite woman. This is a Philistine woman again. So the issue that he continually has is loving foreign women and chasing after foreign women. What causes all of Samson's problems are these foreign women, that he cannot avoid them. He constantly chases after them and lusts after them and goes after them and he covets them. And that's really when his problems start. We're going to see the big problem here in chapter 16. So the Philistines try to take advantage of this in verse 5. They come to Delilah and say, seduce him, find out where his strength lies. They want to know, where is his power? How does he get his strength? What makes Samson Samson? Because they want to capture him. They want to arrest him. They want to, ultimately they want to kill him. They want to get Samson out of their hair. He's causing a mess. They like the old days where all they did was just terrorize Israel and nobody said anything. Well, now every time they try to terrorize Israel, Samson comes along and he sort of thwarts the plans, or he terrorizes the Philistines in return. So they say, seduce him, find out where his strength lies, that we may overpower him, that we may bind him and humble him. So they want to humiliate him. They want to destroy him. They cannot stand him. They say, we will pay you 1,100 pieces of silver apiece. Now there are about 5 of them that come to her and make this proposal. So 1,100 times 5 is 5,500. Well, 1,100 pieces of silver would pay all the living expenses for 3 years. That 5 of them are coming, and they're each offering 1,100 pieces of silver. So 5,500 pieces of silver is going to pay the living expenses for Delilah for 15 years. 15 years. She won't have to work. She won't have to lift a finger. She won't have to rely on anyone. She won't have to do anything. Everything's paid for 15 years. That's a pretty enticing deal. I mean, if I offered you could either go to your job every day and work for the next 15 years, or I'm going to give you money and pay all your wages for the next 15 years. You don't have to do anything. You get $100,000 a year for the next 15 years. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go to work. You don't have to get out of bed. Just stay at home all day. 15 years, free and clear. And all you have to do is give me what I want. That's what they're offering her. A very, very tempting deal. I think most of us would probably be pretty tempted to take that offer. Once we did the numbers and ran the calculations and figured out the taxes and whatnot, we would sign up pretty quick. And, this appeals to Delilah. She's like, well, verse 6, please, goes to Samson, and tell me where your great strength is, and how you might be bound, that one could subdue you. So Delilah willingly accepts this offer, and she says, absolutely, I will take that offer. The modern day analogy is, what is your price for the confession of Jesus Christ? If I'm going to offer you season tickets to any football team you want, if you deny Jesus, 15 years of season tickets, you go to every game, you sit in a lounge box, the suite box, luxury, anything you want, it's all taken care of and provided for. It's all yours if you deny Jesus. Tempted? Super Bowl tickets for the rest of your life? World Series tickets? NBA final tickets? How about, you can cook and cook all you want, but someone else is going to come in and do all the work, cleaning work. You get a maid to do exactly what you want. 15 years. Rest of your life, just deny Jesus. Latest smartphone, latest gizmo or gadget, 15 years, the latest is all yours if you deny Jesus. We say no because, it's easy to say no when it's a hypothetical situation. Nobody is standing in front of me right now offering me $100,000 for the next 15 years if I deny Jesus. No one's offering you season tickets to your favorite team for the rest of your life if you deny Jesus. No one's offering you the latest gadget. No one's offering you these things. So it's easy to say no. But when someone's standing in front of you with that temptation, ultimately when you find yourself pregnant with that child, all of a sudden an abortion looks that much more tempting. Without the child, I would never have an abortion, 100% pro-life. All of a sudden, it's presented to you. It's very difficult. That's what Delilah's up against. Now, we're going to see here is that Samson's much more committed to Delilah than Delilah is to Samson. Samson's head over heels for her. Delilah, how much does she love Samson? Not as much as she loves 5,500 silver pieces. So this happens 3 different times. Delilah comes to Samson and says, tell me where your strength is. How can you be bound, that one might subdue you? So the first time, Samson says, 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried. I shall become weak like any other man. Bowstrings are, they're made from the sinew or the gut of an animal. So you kill an animal, you sort of gut it, and the muscle and the tendon in there, when it's wet, it's very, very flexible, very strong. When it dries out, that's when it becomes brittle and breaks. Kind of like rubber bands. When rubber bands are exposed to some moisture, some humidity, they're very flexible. You can really use them quite a bit. But if you put them in a drawer or a box and you leave them there for quite a while, eventually they dry out. And then you go and you stretch them and they snap pretty easily. And they crumble. That's kind of what these bowstrings are. Samson says, well, if you bind me with these bowstrings, then I'll be like any other man. The lords of the Philistines bring up the bowstrings that had not been dried, so they're fresh. And Delilah herself binds Samson. And she hid some men in the inner chamber. So like an hall closet or off in the mudroom or something. There's some Philistines hiding in there. And she has him bound. She sees he's bound, and he's good and tight, and she yells, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. Samson breaks the strings. Breaks them like they're nothing. Flax, as thread of flax snaps. So very brittle type thing. As that would snap, so do these bowstrings snap. Now when she says these things, when she says the Philistines are upon you, it's not necessarily that the Philistines jumped out and attacked Samson right there. It may have just been a test. Let me test Samson and see how strong he is right now. And that if he would really struggled and he couldn't free himself, then the Philistines would have run in. But otherwise, they may still have hid in the closet until they knew for sure. Verse 10, Delilah says, Samson, you've mocked me and told me lies. She again says, tell me how you might be bound. Samson says, if they bind me with new ropes that have not been used, then I shall become weak and like any other man. So, rope is, when rope is brand new, rope is very strong, very tough. But once you use rope a couple times, once it really gets stretched, then it becomes frail. Then it becomes stretched out. It's not as strong as it used to be. And that's when the rope snaps. So that is what happens again. She binds him with a new rope. And she again says, the Philistines are upon you. And he snaps the ropes. Like they're thread. Like they're nothing. Third time, she says again, you've mocked me. Tell me how you might be bound. Samson says, if you weave the 7 locks on my head with the web and fasten it with the pin, then I shall become weak and like any other man. So at this time, the loom, the sewing machine, in a sense, would really be fastened to the floor. It would really be bolted down. It's not something that you picked up and moved around the room. So it was very heavy, very bolted down. So she takes his hair and finds the 7 locks, or the 7 central points, braids them, ties them, and pins them. Pins them to the machine. And then, he's asleep while she does this. And then again, she says, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. Samson wakes up from his sleep and he just pulls it away like it's nothing. So we see her 3 different times she has gone to Samson and said, tell me your strength. 3 different times Samson has lied to her. She's gone ahead with what he said, And then when it's time to say the Philistines are upon you, Samson very easily breaks the bowstrings, breaks the ropes, pulls away from the loom. So why does Samson do this? There's kind of the real question here is, why does Samson keep this up? As we saw in chapter 14, Samson kind of likes riddles, he kind of likes teasing people. But there's more to it than that. Samson's confidence, Samson's belief is that all of this strength he has is found in himself. That God did not grant him this strength. That Samson himself acquired this strength. That Samson is very much responsible for this strength, not God. So he kind of has this overconfidence in himself, that whatever comes at him, the lion, the Philistines, no matter who it is, he can always overpower them. He can always overtake them. He can always defeat them. That's kind of what his assumption is that he can always muscle his way out. He can always defeat everyone, win the battle, win the day. And that's kind of what it's at the root here. And this is kind of Israel's problem. Israel always thinks they can do it without God. Israel always thinks that they're smarter than God. They're stronger than God. They know what to do. We see this with the kings later on. God says, don't make a treaty. They go out and make a treaty. I think it's Josiah goes out, very faithful king. One day he decides to go up. Egypt's going around. And he says, hey, you're kind of close to our land. I'm going to go out and fight you. God says, don't do it. He does it anyway. He dies. Israel loses its king. So we see this constantly happening here, is that, and we do this ourselves, we always think we're responsible for what's happening. That we can save the day ourselves. That we don't need God, we don't need anyone else, we can do it ourselves. We think about this when we leave the church. We stop coming to church. Why? I don't need the pastor. I don't need the sacraments. I don't need the word. I don't need the fellowship of the church. All I need is myself. I can do it on my own. I got my portals of prayer. I got my Bible. I can do it on my own. Eventually, you fall away. That's what happens. And so we see this happening again and again, this over self-confidence that eventually leads astray all who believe. And that's Samson's problem. Samson places all his confidence in himself. He bets on himself, as some would like to say. I'm going to bet on myself that I can do this. He gets away with it for a while, but eventually he loses. Verse 15. Delilah says to Samson, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times. You have not told me where your great strength lies. Delilah says, if you loved me, you would tell me. Kind of like, there are no secrets here. Why are you keeping secrets from me? Stop keeping this secret from me. Tell me where your strength is if you really love me. A lot of teenagers can probably relate to that. If you loved me, you would sleep with me. That's the constant lie teenagers are told. If you love me, you would sleep with me. If you love me, you would do this with me. If you love me, tell me your secret. 16, when she pressed him hard with her words day after day and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. Samson really loved Delilah. Samson has had these moments before. He's kind of chased after girls. Girls have surely chased after him. There's never really been that match. But now Samson has found his match. He's found his mate. He's found the one he truly loves. And it's Delilah. Samson's problem is that Delilah does not share these feelings. Delilah loves 5,500 pieces of silver more than she loves Samson. Delilah wants the silver, not Samson. So she goes to him, and she knows that he loves her. And she's using that love to get what she wants. But she's going to milk him for all he's worth. And then when he's all dried up and lost and abandoned, she's going to toss him off to the side. Verse 17, he told her all his heart. He looked at her and he literally poured out his heart. He told her all his secrets. He told her the main secret. A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me. I shall become weak, be like any other man. There's an interesting point there about the Nazarite vow. Samson is a terrible Nazarite. He is a horrible Nazarite. Nazarites don't drink. I'm pretty sure Samson was a drinker. Nazarites don't do a lot of things. Nazarites are very faithful people. They take this vow of faithfulness unto God. The only symbol of being a Nazarite that Samson has left is his hair. That's it. There's nothing else. That's the only Nazarite symbol that Samson can still claim, that his hair has never been cut. Everything else he has forsaken. He only has this tiny bit of Nazarite left in him. Verse 18, when Delilah sees that he told her all his heart, she calls the lords of the Philistines, come up again. He's told me all his heart. He's told me where his strength lies. They come, this time, they come ready for an ambush. They know that this is their opportunity. Verse 19, she made him sleep on her knee. She probably seduced him. Maybe got him drunk. They may have had sex. But she lures him into a sleep. He strokes her. She strokes him. Probably whispers sweet nothings into his ear. But she convinces him that he is safe. And she convinces him to fall asleep. She cuts his hair. Actually, no, I'm sorry. She did not cut his hair. She called a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. She's probably there rubbing his back, caressing him, stroking him, keeping him calm. Because, when I get my hair cut, hopefully pretty soon here, it's getting kind of shaggy. I'm going to be a Nazarite pretty soon. When you get your hair cut, it's kind of, depending on who cuts it, sometimes they get a little rough. They just take the clippers and buzz mine. Well, sometimes they go smooth, and other times it's like they're mowing the lawn up there. And they're just really ripping it out of your head. So she is probably there, calming him, keeping him calm, while the guy comes and shaves his head. Probably first starting with, a knife and just cutting off the locks, the long locks, cutting it down as far as you can, and then shaving it the rest of the way. Then she began to torment him. She began to tease him. She woke him up. Probably said, hey, wake up, wake up, wake up. Let's see you now. His strength left him. So with the hair leaving, the strength leaves. She says, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep. And Samson does not realize anything is wrong. He doesn't realize his hair is gone. He doesn't realize the strength has left him. He wants to shake himself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. So he doesn't realize yet that his strength has departed. The Philistines rush in, they bum rush him, they grab him, and they take him and they gouge out his eyes. So the last thing Samson sees is conceivably Delilah standing before him, laughing at him, mocking him, counting those silver coins. Reminiscent of the end of Jeremiah, where the king is taken to Babylon. What is the last thing that happens before he departs for Babylon? They gouge out his eyes. So the last thing he sees is Jerusalem collapsing around him. Here with Samson, what's the last thing he sees? It might be Delilah standing there laughing at him, pointing at him, mocking him, counting those silver coins, sort of throwing them in the air and celebrating that she has, gotten this great amount of money. The Philistine seized him, gouged out his eyes, brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with bronze shackles. So very, iron, bronze, what they had at the time. And they put him at a mill in the prison. And he was to grind the mill. And I think there's a children's book, Arch book, that depicts this scene, where it's kind of like a big wheel, and all you have to do is just walk in a circle pushing the wheel. Normally it's woman work. This is not work you would give to a man. This is not hard work, but it's embarrassing work. It's not work a man would do. It's work a woman would do. And that's his punishment, is he pushes this wheel around, and he just walks in a circle all day, grinding at the mill. And, presumably he's pushing this, and it's grinding down. He's pushing a big weight that is grinding down the flour into powder. Verse 22 is kind of the end of this section, but it does give us a hopeful looking ahead. The hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaved, which is kind of what you would expect. I get a haircut, in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, I'll need another haircut. So Samson here, he's bald, but then over the course of time his hair grows back. So something that, you would expect, but it's not. The Philistines, we're kind of going to see this next week, the Philistines don't necessarily realize it. It's an important note here that his hair grows back, but the Philistines evidently don't notice. So that does bring us to the end of this section of chapter 16. Samson is a picture of Israel. He's a picture of faithfulness, but he's also a picture of unfaithfulness. He should be doing the Lord's work, serving God, defeating the Philistines, judging Israel accordingly. But at the same time, he also chases after these Philistine women, just as Israel chases after the Philistine gods. And this is his downfall. It's Israel's downfall. Why is Israel being ruled by the Philistines? Because they chased after the gods of the Philistines, and God is punishing them. So that is where Samson finds himself today. He's left at the mill grinding the flour. And he's bald. And he's blind, so we can't see. All of which does set up what we're going to look at next week, which is the death of Samson, which is a tragic death, but it's also kind of a going out with a bang or a flash of glory. But we will look at that next week. So again, if you have questions or comments, feel free to message me. Let me know what those questions or comments are. We'll try to cover them next week. And then, very important, if you have a favorite character or story in the Bible, let me know, and we will look at them starting in October. Look at your favorite characters. So that will bring us to the end for today, and we'll see you next week as we finish off chapter 16 and the account of Samson. Have a great day. May the Lord bless the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you later.